Good evening. Welcome to Defacto Review, our weekly in-depth analysis of the modern current affairs and news with our economist and commentator, Mr. Jargal Defacto.
Good evening.
And I'm Namsrat Sindh. You can join us on Facebook Live, and you can also join us on Twitter via hashtag Jargal_Defacto. And for today's program, why was the video of corrupt officials leaked? Is the policy reform being implemented successfully? On to our first topic about the president's visit to the United States. President of Mongolia, Battulga paid an official visit to the United States. He held official talks with his counterpart, Donald Trump, followed by signing some agreements. A draft to export Mongolian cashmere and wool to the United States free of tax was presented to the US Congress as a result of this meeting. The relations of the two countries have reached a new level, and a strategic partnership has been established. Now, as for our first question about this, how do you evaluate the significance of the president's visit to the United States?
Well, as it says that it is very important because we have announced, two countries announced that the level of cooperation as a strategic. And the President Battulga made a speech, lecture before the meeting, President Donald Trump, at the Center for Strategic Studies, International Studies, and in which he described the current situation of cooperation between two countries as very good, and in particular in the field of political, social, at the level of individual citizens level, the cooperation is doing very good. Mongolians send peacekeepers to several countries, and they have been working with the American soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan, and recently we had also 17th times the Han quest, or the military exercise to support peace operations in certain countries. But however, economic relations, economic cooperation between two countries have to be improved. According to statistics, in 2018, the foreign trade with the U.S., between U.S. and Mongolia, is only less than 2% in Mongolian total volume of foreign trade. And according to the document submitted to the Congress by a few congressmen in the U.S., the trade volume between two countries was $707 million in 2012, and today in 2017 it was about only $82 million, and imported only 9.4 million in goods from Mongolia. So economic cooperation has some potential, and he was specifically highlighting particular industry where we can, for example, increase our economic cooperation. So in general, the level of partnership and cooperation between two countries is really at very high level.
So, if in case the third neighbor law is approved, how will this affect Mongolia's economy?
There is the third neighbor trade act. That's the name for the act, law in American version, so submitted by several congressmen to give a preferential tariff rate to Mongolian cashmere and wool products, which will give a good chance for Mongolia to develop agriculture, create more jobs, in particular for women. Why? Because Mongolia is almost producing half of the world cashmere. They supply half of the world cashmere yearly now, but only 10% of this cashmere is processed inside of the country, and 90% goes to China as raw materials. And if we more process our Kashmir, it will create more jobs. And plus, he also the president also said that since in two our neighbor countries, a lot of state-owned enterprises are dominant, it's very hard to just leave private sector just to compete fairly with these state-owned enterprises, which doesn't work. And the Kashmir, if this law is approved by Congress and by Senate, it will create up to 50,000 jobs in Mongolia, in the countryside. However, this is the law particularly designed for one country, because initially it was not designed for one country. The name was different. Because the word third neighbor, it's the terms Mongolians use referring to other neighbors than our two permanent neighbors. And but however, the congressman decided to have this particular name since it has U.S. has a trade tariff war between U.S. and China, and there is a certain problem between other neighbor countries of the U.S. in terms of trade. So if this law doesn't go through to chambers of the Congress, then at least probably it will be a GSP, generalized system of preferences for Mongolia. However, Mongolia had the same conditions with the European Union, and somehow Mongolia have not fully used that preferred conditions for trade. And I hope it will not happen with relations with the trade to the U.S.
So this was a very high-level visit, but the lack of preparation of this visit was heavily criticized by the public. For example, the translator was very inexperienced, and was the Ministry of Foreign Affairs irresponsible about this matter?
No, I don't think this kind of comments are not much have a grounds, since this sort of level meeting is not happening, even not every year. And to prepare this high-level visit of two presidents' meetings, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and our particular embassy in Washington have been working very hard, and all details were so very scrupulously worked out, and all protocol things went very well, even more than expected. Instead of 50 minutes planned time, two presidents spent together 40 minutes. As far as the translation issue, it happened in this institute, the Center for Strategic Studies in the Washington, and the speech of president was translated from the translator's cabin, normally, professionally. But when it comes to the Q&A sessions, because all these things, president does not speak English, so he, instead of translating word after word, they were just saving time, and the manager, his assistant, the manager, there sitting next to him, he was talking very briefly, very fast about the questions in English, in Mongolian, because 250 participants were mostly Americans, and when they asked questions, he was translating to his ear that words, and he was supposed to speak to the microphone so that the person, a professional translator at the podium, could hear and translate. But because he was not speaking to the microphone, he could not translate. He said, "I cannot hear you," on microphone. And then the president started to talk to the person who is also a very experienced man from his office, Mr. Tushin Zaya, and who did a good job, by the way. And because all this translation mismanagement, or it had happened, it is not, nothing had especially planned for that, but things overall went much better than the social media is talking about. And concerning the preparation of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they did a great job. That's why, I mean, America has, with 200 or so countries, diplomatic relations, and meeting a president of any country is a big deal, and it is happening maybe once a 10 year or so. So the meeting went very well.
I see. So we talked about the president's visit to the United States. Now on to our next topic about leaked videos of corruption cases. The Anti-Corruption Agency has leaked 2 new videos during their operations report. There were several discussions on social media after these videos were leaked. The first one was related to the Chief of National Transportation Department, Batbayır. It was revealed that he received 57 million Mongolian Tugrux bribe for providing a special license, and 25 million was found in his office. He was fined 6.5 million Tugruks and banned from working in any government office for 3 years. The second leaked video was related to the ex-chiefs of the Professional Inspection Department, Atsaya and Bayırsahan. A total of 230 million Tugruks, $152,000 and 77,000 yuan in cash were confiscated from Bayırsahan. He was fined 40 million Tugruks and banned from working in any government office for 5 years. So, on to our questions. Why were these videos leaked? This has never been done before. No one did this. But is there any political reason behind this?
Anti-Corruption Agency was getting it available on social media, which is good. It's better to see that and not instead of not seeing that. However, this case were 2 years old, and these people, except one, Bayırsahan, had not even any punishment due to the termination of the expiration term of the investigation of any criminal case in the country. We have such a law that after certain years, 5 years, you cannot investigate anymore. So, and that reminds Mongolians, they shows Mongolians how does this corruption work, how this guy put into his socks $10,000 and taking it out under the direction, in the order of the investigators. It is also reminding us to reconsider our corruption fight, combating the corruption. We better to use some methods that Chinese use. Chinese Communist Party took over corruption cases, and since 2012, they call high-ranking officials tigers, lower-ranking officials flies, and so far 1.5 million people for the last 7 years were punished for corruption. That's how Chinese effectively combat corruptions, which is just the opposite in Mongolia, because in our country, tigers are now freely walking around. Some couple of flies are arrested, like this guy, two videos show. So really the combating corruption in Mongolia is really not very effective. I should say only 2 tigers, if I may say so. 2 ministers had some punishment, got serving prison terms. But these 2 ministers these 2 tigers were from non-ruling parties. We have 2 political parties ruling in the country for the last 30 years, either alone or together. So these 2 parties have not punished their own tigers, and their tigers go around, and they even, I would say that they even make special law to get them free, moving around. And for example, there is a law which, as I said, the terms of investigation expires only 4 years, within 4 years, 5 years. And this is the one example that the tigers go around. The other one is there was an amnesty law in 2015 in August. They made amnesty for those who have reported their income, and during a 7 or so months, and people have reported their income, and the law was saying that nothing will be asked, and the state will keep the secret of the source of those money. As a result, the country got more than the economy, 33 billion Tugriks into the economy, which now slowly we understand that this is corrupt money. Many of them are corrupt money, just the kind of money laundering. People, mostly probably people who corrupt, got reported those money making illegal. So this kind of ineffective combat is happening in Mongolia with corruption, unfortunately.
So Mongolia received a total of 19 recommendations about corruption from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, but only one of them has been implemented. Like, why is that? Why aren't they not implementing?
As you said, there is an OECD anti-corruption campaign, and it started in 2003. Mongolia had joined in 2012, and since that, for the last 7 years, we have created special agency combating corruption, independent agency anti-corruption for anti-corruption. So what happened was that OECD people, professionals came, studied Mongolia for the last 5 years. In 2015, they made a recommendation, as you said, 19 recommendations. Only one was implemented completely, which is just more creating related structure to combat corruption. But whatever structure is created, if it is not working, fighting, then it has no sense. So that was the case. And recently, last week, OECD, another group come and made another recommendations. 2 good books came out, 29 recommendations, including those which was not fulfilled in Mongolia. Just 2 major conclusions I would like to share from that new recommendation, which was presented last week. It says, one, this term of investigation is too short, and more and more immunity is coming to a lot more and more public officials. That's the first conclusion, in which they also say that the people are getting punishment way lower than the damage they're making in the country to the public service. And also, the term is too short. The second conclusion was they made also a recommendation, said that Mongolian prosecutors have very unusual right to close their files before the court. Indeed, 1/4 of the criminal files, corruption criminal files, are closed before it comes to the court. 1/4 last year, a year before it was 40%, now 25%. And it is indeed true, which is very unfortunate, because many tigers, mostly flies, also they manage to close their files before it goes to the court. That's why the country wants to change this judicial system. And really, the situation with prosecutors, we call it procureurs, not very easy. And the report says, with the recommendation says that should not decrease the salary of prosecutors, and also the country must confiscate all money they have got as a bribe, which unfortunately is not happening in the country. And many people, in particular, for example, those people who misused the proceeds from Genghis Khan bonds, for which the country paid so many money as just the interest rate, and they are still, those tigers are moving freely. And somehow either they are waiting for that term, which is expired immediately, they are extending courts. Courts are delayed by many reasons. Somehow today they finally get together, then they will find some reason to postpone that court. That's what is. This is the way how Mongolia is combating with tigers, corruption tigers.
I see. So we talked about the leaked videos of the corruption case. Now on to our next topic about the policy reforms. The World Bank will invest $100 million in Mongolia to promote the implementation of policy reforms. World Bank's Economic Management Support Program was implemented in Mongolia in 2017, aimed at promoting macroeconomy management, internal economic stabilization, improving social security systems, and the competitiveness of Mongolia's economy. So our first question about this is, how much difference will $100 million make to the Mongolia's economy? And how will this fund managed once it comes?
Well, it is whether investment or not clear. It's financing. Probably this is a loan, development loan. $100 million is a lot if you use correctly. If you misuse, then it is, if the other guy on the video who got $10,000 put into his socks, then we will have 10,000 bureaucrats having each $10,000. So this is the way how the money can disappear. Hopefully not this time. Economy is effective if it does create jobs, okay? Very simple one word, jobs. Jobs are not being created because taxes still high, in particular social taxes, insurance, fee, etc., medical insurance, all the fee altogether, almost 1/3 of the costs per employee from employer perspective. So 1/3 of money that is supposed to go to employee are coming to the state, and that are increasing every year with 1%, which creates a difficulty for private sector and destroying any incentives to hire people full-time. And plus also half-time workers, for half-time workers, still you pay that quarter 1/3 of the money to the state as if it is a full-time employee. So the job market are getting tough. Mongolians private sector don't much eager to create jobs because it's becoming more and more expensive as a tax. And that's why not many jobs are created. Mongolians are running away from the country to find other better paid jobs. Mostly they go to Korea. Now we have 50,000 Mongolians working in Korea. So economy as such, it's very hard to say it is improved. And though the World Bank says that the macroeconomic situation is better because now the budget deficit become from 16% in 2016, now 2.7% in 2018, and the deficit is gone. We have a surplus of deficit. But it is mostly because the World Bank and IMF money are cheaper than the commercial market money of the bond, which was 7 or 9% or 10%. And because the state was paying too much interest rate, they were almost using quarter of our revenue of budget for just paying the interests of loans on domestic and international market. On domestic market, the government were issuing domestic bond at the level of higher than the saving rate, which was kind of a robbery almost for businesses. And it was banks would prefer to buy government bonds than they issue credit to businesses. So more or less, because this cheaper money come from IMF, World Bank, more or less this issue is solved. Budget is in more better shape than before, but it doesn't mean that state is less, and still we have challenges with jobs. That's what the reports of the World Bank, which gives authority to issue $100 million to Mongolians.
So, is the current attempts of the government to implement the macroeconomic reforms effective, or is it just not in step with the economic cycle of Mongolia?
See, Mongolian economy depends on mining. Several commodities, copper, coal, and those prices comes up and down. And that's why, to have a stable economy, we need to develop industries other than mining, which are not successfully much done. And also it is because in countryside, more and more people losing their jobs, hopes, and herds, and they go to city to find jobs. So mostly they're buying all cheap Prius and becoming taxi drivers. And so the issue of, for example, to have jobs in countryside it is an issue of the health of the herd, health
of the livestock.
Yeah, the health of livestock. And we need to substantially improve that situation, which somehow the state talks a lot, but nothing is much done. So still it's a jobs issue.
So how much or how little did Hursuk's cabinet achieve regarding these economic reforms up until now, up until today?
Well, I described the problems we face: diversification of the economy, creation of jobs, decreasing of poverty level, which, by the way, just decreased just 1% out of, it was just at the level of 29. From the 30, it goes to 29. But still a lot of things to do, and we don't see substantial change in terms of hiring, as I describe it now, in terms of diversifying economies, because the tax is still high. They keep increasing taxes, and also I think the World Bank is advising them to increase taxes, which does not help the private sector. Yes, we need mismatch. We have a mismatch of education supply and labor supply and demand. But not people. We don't have a big mismatch. What some industries need in terms of skilled worker and the way how they have skills or training. And another demand, which have not the current government and Mongol Bank have not done, is to make transparent, public, those reports of investigation or independent auditing reports around Development Bank and the Central Bank recent investigations of other commercial banks. So this information is to be opened, to be public for a while. That's what the recommendation says of the World Bank, which is good for transparency of the public governance, which is, along with the corruption we have talked, a major bottleneck of development of Mongolia, progress in the country, confidence of the people in the future, in the tomorrow.
So you said this $100 million could be a loan.
Most probably.
Is it really wise to get another loan when we haven't really paid off the previous ones?
Yeah, because the package of IMF led a group help to Mongolia, because almost this bankrupt situation at the end of 2016. It includes a package of a certain almost $5 billion package, and it goes tranche by tranche depending on the conditions that they are asking the Mongolian government to do in order to change the macroeconomic situations, including, for example, the next tranche of the money would come if the equity capital of commercial banks investigation or checking is done on time and reported publicly, because there is a concern that those commercial banks need to increase their equity capital and they need to report where the money came from. They have all of them increased, but they now to make sure that the money is not money laundering or financing terrorism, which is just ordinary demand for every country, because that's the problem the whole world faces, and that's why Mongolia should do that. Then the next tranche is coming, and while it is coming, they will suggest all conditions for better governance to be done, which is still ongoing process.
Okay, so unfortunately that was all the time we had for today. We will see you next week with another one.
Thank you very much. See you next week.
Have a nice evening.